All right, don't be alarmed. I'm in a different location. I'm actually in my bedroom recording this, but anyway, let's begin. So this week, today really, March 19th, marks 20 years since the United States, with the help of the UK, Poland, Australia, among other nations, launched an offensive war against the sovereign Arab country of Iraq. The US, and by that I mean George Bush, Dick Cheney, Rummy, Donald Rumsfeld, George Tenet, among others in the administration, insinuated that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and he was going to use it against us and our allies. Obviously, this turned out to be complete poppycock. We invaded, toppled his regime, and thus made the situation in Iraq unimaginably worse. An insurgency was born with Abu Musab al-Zarqawi as its leader. Cholera, unemployment, torture all became rampant in the years following, almost immediately. It was total lawlessness starting in 2003 onward. Bush, Cheney, among others, left the nation in utter shambles. The war, it wasn't even a war anymore. It became an occupation. Because a war implies that there's an end goal, there's an objective to be reached. But an occupation means you're just there. There was no clear objective, so therefore it was an occupation. And the effects of the occupation continued to be felt after 2 decades and counting. So after 20 years, we need to ask ourselves, was it all worth it? Obviously, in the years after, the Islamic State flourished. They gained massive ground about 11, 12 years after the invasion in 2014 and 2015. This notion that Bush kept us safe, I don't think he did. I don't think he did. No, we were very, very vulnerable to terrorism. How do I know this? Well, March 11th, 2004, in Madrid, you had, I believe it was 10 terrorists loosely linked to Al-Qaeda blow themselves up on 4 commuter trains. They killed 192 people. Yeah. Why did they do this? Well, apparently Spain had direct involvement in the Iraq War. They were actively involved with logistics or something like that, so that's why that attack happened. Fast forward over a year later, July 7th, 2005, London. 4 terrorists trained in Pakistan blew themselves up on 3 London Underground trains and a double-decker bus. 52 people killed, over 700 injured, and the injury count in Madrid was over 1,000, by the way. And why did they attack the UK? Well, Tony Blair, then Prime Minister, was essentially the co-sponsor of the Iraq War. And because not only was he the co-sponsor of the Iraq War, he was also like side by side with President Bush with the war on terror in general. And that's why that happened. They were trying to stick it to Tony Blair and say, hey, stop what you're doing or else expect more of 7/7, which is basically what they call the attack I just mentioned. Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, July 23rd, 2005, you had numerous car bombings in the overnight hours of that day. Killed 88 people. Many of them were Egyptians, but Sharm el-Sheikh is a resort town popular with Western tourists. There were 4 Americans, I believe, that died. There were also people from like Czech Republic, Germany, Netherlands, places like those. So yeah, I don't think that's keeping us safe. So And just democracy, it didn't seem very tangible in Iraq. Despite minimal progress, because there were elections held in, like, Fallujah and those places. So minimal progress on that front. Also, if you listen to Tony Blair talk about his basis of the war, his rationale, it's different than George Bush's. Blair doesn't mention WMDs. He doesn't really mention the same things that George Bush does. I mean, he kind of does. There's some overlap, but he says that instead of, again, droning on about WMDs, he asserts that Saddam Hussein was hindering economic and social progress in the country, and that Iraq had so much potential, but he just stifled all that potential. He just hindered all that potential that it had because of his policies and what he would do, what he was doing. But back to the war itself. Veterans who were deployed there got massively screwed over with tour extensions. So it's like, oh, hey, look at me. I'm going home in a week. I'm going to see my wife, kids, or my girlfriend, whoever. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, your tour was extended. You don't go home in a week. You go home in a month, or you go home in 2 months, or 6 months. Some crazy thing like that. What? So that screwed over a lot of people, and there was just not the best oversight there. Also, the missions that these soldiers had, it really got them thinking, like, should we be doing this? Like, does this even make any sense? Which anyone who has been in the military knows that it's not your job to think, it's your job to follow orders. But, sometimes you really just can't do that. Sometimes you have to trust your gut. You got to trust your instinct as to what's right and what's wrong. You got to look in your heart to decide what's best for you and what's best for your infantry unit, what have you. Now, granted, the situation in Iraq has improved over these past 20 years. In terms of safety, it's far from 100%, and the scars left behind will never be expunged. And that's all I gotta say. I just wanted to make this video because just give a little insight as to how it's been after 20 years in Iraq of us being there, because obviously, I think Obama got us out in 2011, but we came back in, and then we came out, came back in, yo-yoed the troop levels, and this has lasted numerous administrations. And also, like, I was 8 years old when this war started. I was in 2nd grade, and I think my family and I actually went to DC, like, as the war was in full swing, before George Bush made the whole mission accomplished announcement on the aircraft carrier, job well done. I think we walked through an Iraq war protest, and it was crazy. I was like, wow. 8-year-old me was stunned by it. So, and that's all I have to say, though. I'm gonna end it here.